So part 2. This is the part that gets too big to do these problems on the sheet. So we're going to do them on my whiteboard. This is the next one. We have to use long division this time instead of synthetic because of that 3 out in front of the x. If you tried to put that in a box, you get 1/3 or negative 1/3, and we really don't want to use fractions with synthetic division. So let's go over here and start to use some long division. And in long division, you want to see how many times this number can go into this first number. And the 3 can go into the 9 3 times. And the x can go into the x cubed 2 times. Then we just multiply this by this, which would give me 9x cubed. Then I multiply this by this, which would give me 3x squared. Now what you do is you subtract the two numbers. Well, 9 minus 9 is 0, so those go away. Negative 18 minus 3. Well, let's pull up the calculator just real quick to make sure we do this right. So negative, whoops, that's 19. Minus 3 gives me negative 21. So this is going to be negative 21x squared. Let's bring down the negative x. Okay, now we do the same game. How many times does 3x go into negative 21x squared? Well, 3 to get to 21 would have to be negative 7. And then x to get to x squared would be x. So this would be negative 21x squared when we multiply this by this. And now we have to multiply this by this, which would give me negative 7x. Let's subtract. Those go away. Then we have to do negative 1 minus a negative 7, which would give me a positive 6. Now we have to think about how many times the 3x will go into the 6x. Well, that would be 2 times. And then when we multiply those things, we'd get 6x plus 2, because it would be 2 times the 3x. When we do that, that cancels and that cancels. So my remainder would be 0, and this would be a factor. And the reason we know it's a factor is because the remainder is 0. Try the next problem. Okay, here's my next problem. They ask, let me pull up the sheet for a second. They ask on this, find the third degree polynomial in standard form. So the first thing we should know is when they give me answers like this, these are actually the answers. To go to standard form, we have to get it into factored form and then get into standard form. This thing is missing a 0 though. The reason I know it's missing a 0 is because this square root. Anytime we have a square root, we need a positive and a negative. We right now just have the negative. So we would also need 1 plus radical 7. Okay, let's write this in factored form. This would be x minus 2. This would be x minus 1 minus radical 7. And this would be x minus 1 plus radical 7. The first thing we're going to do for this problem, because to get into the standard form, we got to FOIL everything. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to FOIL these negative signs to make it a little bit easier on myself. When we do that, we should get x minus 1 plus radical 7, and then get x minus 1 minus radical 7. Now, again, my recommendation is always FOIL the back stuff first. And we have to FOIL over 3 terms this time. So let's do that. x times x is x squared. X times negative 1 is negative 1x. And x times radical 7 is negative radical 7. Next one's, we're going to FOIL over these three things. Negative 1 times x is negative 1x. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. And negative 1 times negative radical 7 is positive radical 7. Let's FOIL the last three things, which would be this. So radical 7 times x is positive radical 7x. I forgot that x from before that I just realized. Radical 7 times negative 1 would be negative radical 7. And then radical 7 times negative radical 7. Let's do this on the side. So radical 7 times negative radical 7 would be negative radical 49. Would just be, well, radical 49 would just give me 7. So this would be negative radical 7. Or negative 7. Okay. Lots of stuff. Let's combine the lots of stuff. So, this is a negative radical 7. This is a positive radical 7. Those two things cancel. This is a positive radical 7. This is a negative radical 7. Those two things cancel. Now we're just left with everything else. So, these are like terms. These are like terms. So we would get x squared minus 2x minus 6. Whew. Now we have the x minus 2 and this. So we got to FOIL one more time. This luckily goes a little bit faster than the last time. So I would get x cubed minus 2x squared minus 6x. This would give me negative 2x squared plus 4x plus 12. Those combined. Those combined. We would get x cubed minus 4x squared minus 2x plus, plus 12. And there's my final answer. Next one. Okay. This one has two square roots, and I counts as a square root. This counts as a square root. So we need to add in the other ones, which would be negative 3i and positive radical 5. Let's put those in factored form. This one goes a little bit quicker. Let's FOIL. We get x squared minus 3ix plus 3ix minus 9i squared. Those will cancel because those are the same. Okay, this is the tricky part. And I squared, what it does is I squared is negative 1. So since I squared is negative 1, it's going to take this negative 9 and flip the sign, so I'll get positive 9. Let's do this other side. We'll get x squared minus 5x. square root of 5x plus the square root of 5x. And we did this before. If we do this again, we would get negative the square root of 25, which would just give me negative 5. That's going to cancel with this. I'm going to be left with x squared minus 5. Now we just have to FOIL this mess. When we FOIL this mess, we'll get x to the fourth minus x squared plus 9x squared minus 45, which leaves us with the nice answer of x to the fourth plus 4x squared minus 45. Okay. Ooh. Okay. Let's go back to some of this. I'm going to end the video right here, and we're going to have one more video to get everything in. So I will finish factoring and solving 11, 12, 13, and 14, and then doing some of this stuff down here. But that will be in the next video.